Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. Pat, we're getting close to the All-Star game. We're starting to get into the meat and potatoes, the NFL season winding down. A lot of good storylines across the league, but for me, and I know we were talking about this a little bit before, but I think the Jets have become one of the most interesting storylines because they're sticking around, and the idea of playing playoff games for the first time in many years up in Winnipeg seems like a great idea, and it might just happen. Pat, your thoughts?
We um we discussed, I think it was last week or sometime off air, the notion of Winnipeg hosting a playoff game and a playoff series, and it's been you mentioned it's been I mean that the Jets Coyotes franchise hadn't won a playoff series.
Yeah.
I believe it's been 20 years, but or maybe even more. But Winnipeg hasn't hosted a playoff game since I think it was in the mid '90s. I think it was '90. I want to say '95, but I could be mistaken. It could even be longer than that. But you have the smallest building in the sport, and you have the rabid fan base that was without the sport for what they were out 15 years they were without NHL hockey, and they still had the American League there, and the American League did great, and that's why they went back to Winnipeg. But I watched them play the Blackhawks Friday night in just a fantastic game. Basically, watched the last two periods of that game, and what's interesting to me about that is Winnipeg kind of ran possession against the Blackhawks. I mean, you don't see the Blackhawks the Blackhawks are kind of the model franchise as far as the possession is concerned, as far as the Corsi is concerned. But Winnipeg kind of dominated possession for basically the second half of the second period and then the first half of the third, and that's when the Jets scored the two goals early in the third period. They made a 2-2 tie, a 4-2 victory, or I'm sorry, hang on, just Dave. It was I believe yeah, that's right. Okay, I'm gonna go back and start over. Okay,
No, why don't we just kick the whole
Dave.
thing off again? Yeah, why don't we just kick the whole thing off again?
Okay.
I could have done better with it open.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Sorry, I gotta pause. That's why I was kind of waiting for that to kick up because I wanted to pull up the box for this. Okay, I'm ready when you
okay,
are.
sure. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens, and we bring you an episode today that chock full of great stuff. Of course, the storylines around the league continue to grow as we get into the what I like to call the meat and potatoes. As soon as football goes away, after the All-Star game soon, where you really start to see the cream rise to the top. Pat, to me, there's no story that might be more interesting, not only because of the way they've been playing, but how they've overcome the injuries. Talking about the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, they sit in a playoff spot right now, and it seems like unless they really fall off, that this is a team that is serious about a playoff run. What do you think about the great season that the Jets are having so far?
The moment, and what's most impressive to me is
Are you there? I'm losing you. I can't hear you.
earlier in the week. It's dangerous in all facets of the game. They have a
Hey,
couple of
Pat,
terrific. Yeah,
I couldn't hear you in the
Dave.
beginning there. You might want to start over. I don't know if if it went in. It could just be my
Okay.
end, but I don't know.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Can
I
you?
just don't want to. Yes, I just don't want you
Okay.
to be cut off in the beginning. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
sure. All right, I'll start over. I think what's most impressive about the Jets to me is that they're dangerous in all facets of the game. If you look back and see how they've won their games this week, they scored 8 goals against Florida. Who you know me, I'm a big Panther fan. I'm a big fan of the Panther team right now. I think they're really good, and they dominated. They had the 4 goal game from Matthew Perreault, nearly a 5 goal game from Matthew Perreault. But then you see them, they go to Dallas and they win a game 2-1 where Andre Pavlich stops 46 shots. And then Friday night, they go to Chicago and they basically dominate the possession. Um, they basically dominate the possession time for the second half of the game against the the Blackhawks. And the Blackhawks are kind of the model franchise as far as the possession game is concerned. And if you watch the game, I watched the game pretty closely for basically the halfway point on. The Jets kind of ran or dominated the possession in Chicago's end for basically 20 minutes, from the last 10 minutes of the second period to the first 10 minutes of the third. And that's when the Jets scored the two goals. Two goals just 28 seconds apart. Brian Little with the power play goal, and then Chris Thorburn for the Jets, that fourth line even coming up big. So, see, they're getting the balanced scoring. Evander Kane is back earlier than expected. He was supposed to be out until February, and he came back this week. I believe he came back in Dallas, was his first game back. So this is a dangerous team, and it's a dangerous team that plays for its coach. I mean, if you look at the lines, and if you look at the talent, I mean, a top line of Andrew Ladd, Brian Little, Blake Wheeler, a second line of Matthew Perreault, Mark Scheifele, and Michael Frolik. I mean, these are not terrific. They're not like household skill names. They're good centers. Scheifele, I think, is very underrated. Little as a top line, and obviously the captain Andrew Ladd on their left wing, that top line. I think those guys are a little underrated just because of where they play. You always hear a lot about it. Evander Kane, mostly from the distraction, and Dustin Byfuglien's been fantastic. Not been a distraction, but I think this team has played for Paul Maurice since he took over last year. Remember, Scheifele's injury really kind of derailed their run towards the playoffs last year, and I'm really excited about getting some new blood in this year, especially when you consider what you're looking at from a playoff perspective. But I mean, we've talked about it, Dave. You can't. The two of us can't wait to see what a playoff game in Winnipeg looks like.
Absolutely, and the thing is, here's a good question for you. On the active roster right now, how many players have a minus rating as we stand? Just a little trivia question for you. Just take a guess. How many guys?
I'm going to say not many, because they're pretty. Their goal differential is plus 13. How many?
2.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, they're a good 5-on-5 team. If you look at good 5-on-5 teams win these days.
Exactly. That's the thing about them. I know they're not flashy. I know that this is a team that probably isn't gonna blow your doors off, though they have even shown they can do that. But I just think that this is a team that is honestly they're built to do well in the playoffs. I'm not saying they're gonna get past any of the big guys out west. I think they need to get a little deeper to do that. But I think that they have all the tools to make a run, and you know what? Honestly, I can't see them dropping out of the top 8.
I agree. No, I'm with you wholeheartedly. Unless we start seeing the Andre Pavlich that we saw last year. But even then, they have Michael Hutchinson to keep them honest.
That's another question. What do they do with the old saying, if you have 2 goalies and you have none? Do you think? I mean, Hutchinson's been so good; his numbers are off the chart. But Pavlik's been very good too. Do you think at some point that they have to make a decision getting into that? Once they're maybe 8 to 10 games before the playoffs, really ride one of their guys or something? Because to me, if you go into the playoffs not really knowing who your goaltender is, because they both have made the case at different points in the year, you could be in trouble. Pat, do you think that at some point they finally go with a guy and say, this is who we're going to roll with?
I kind of think it has to be Hutchinson at this point, just because I know Pavlich has started more games, and it's not been a 50-50 split. Pavlich has started more games, but, I mean, Hutchinson's been so terrific, and Pavlich's numbers are much better than they've been in recent years, but he's still, the save percentage is only .913, the goals against is still only 2.46, and Hutchinson is obviously kind of shown himself to be the goalie of the future. He's going to be 25 on March 2nd, which interestingly enough is also the trade deadline this year. But this is a team that, I mean, I agree with you, because you almost have to have one guy, just to get behind, so you guys can, just so you know who the guy is. And the way Hutchinson played, I think he has to be considered the starter, even though Pavlich is seeing more time. I mean, if you're going to go, I've always been the Jets are not necessarily playing for this particular year, this one exact year. This is almost the bonus year for them, right? So
Yeah.
why not throw Hutchinson into the fray here, if you will? They have a bunch of guys who are signed long term. Wheeler's signed long term, Kane's signed long term, Little is signed long term. Ladd is even signed through next season. Scheifele, all of these guys are signed. Enstrom, the defenseman, Bufflin, all these guys signed at least through next season. So if you're going to do that, why not throw Hutchinson into the fire? Let him be the guy in the playoffs. Pavelec can back him up. I mean, if Hutchinson can't do it in the playoffs, you still have Pavelec as a serviceable backup. The point is, give them the experience so that this can be the jumping off point for future years.
Yeah, I agree with that. And looking at Hutchinson's career starts, most games he started was, I believe it was, let's look back at it, yeah, he started 46 games for the London Knights in the OHL. He never has really been a guy has played a ton of games, so I think it might be a good idea for them just to give him a stretch of games towards the end. Obviously, the overall starts this year aren't going to be that high for him, but I think it'd be for them very beneficial to give him the workload towards the end of the regular season, ride him into the playoffs, and know what you have in him for next year. Because look, if he really is going to be this good, and goaltending is not something they need to worry about at all in the near future, they can go out and spend their money and work at getting better other places. So for me, I would at this point I would say he has to be the guy, but who knows?
I agree. If we go from one goaltending, well, I guess a position or team out west that is shoring up its goaltending to a big point in another Central Division team in the goaltending, and that's one of our favorite guys, Marty Brodeur. The Blues announced this week that they were giving Brodeur a leave of absence for 1 week to determine, and then they would determine his future in that 1 week. Brian Elliott's back. This is his position. Jake Allen has been pretty solid also. We've talked about this, that maybe Brodeur would be the backup when Elliott came back, but it doesn't seem that's going to be the case. Where do you see first the Blues going and Brodeur going?
I think here's something interesting about the Blues, though. I think any other team, with the way Elliott has had a good year this year, would have put the young guy down and had the backup and said, look, Brian Elliott, you're our guy. I think with the Blues it's different because this team has pressure to win in the playoffs this year, and the fact that Elliott can sometimes fall off a little bit. For them, I think you have to keep Jake Allen in the mix because you need another 1A, 1A, 1B kind of option if Elliott starts to go, or if either he gets hurt again or he starts to slide a little bit. For Brodeur, I think this might be the end of the line, but you don't know. Look, someone could get hurt. I don't think Nashville would necessarily grab him. Then we'll get to the whole Pecorine situation in a little bit. But for Marty, I don't know if he's done yet. As much as I want to say, yeah, it's probably it. If someone gets hurt, I still think there's a chance we could see him.
Jim Rutherford said, or the Blues general manager Jim Rutherford said before, or as they were signing Brodeur, that this would be an audition for him for the rest of the league. And if you look at his numbers, they're just not that good. 3-3 wins. I mean, whatever you want to make of wins, but 2.89 is the goals against, 8.99 is the save percentage. Basically similar numbers that he had last year in New Jersey. You saw Minnesota go out and get Devin Dubnyk this week, and kind of, I mean, that was maybe one of the landing spots for Brodeur with the horrific goaltending they've had up there. But they go out and get Dubnyk this year, and midseason, and he might, who knows, he might be the starter. But there aren't a lot of landing spots for him either. I mean, if you go through the teams, even for a backup role, I mean, maybe, if you want to go Dallas with, Anders, who knows if Anders Lindback better than Brodeur? Or if you go to, I mean, Detroit's had some goaltending injury, but, Peter Mrazek's kind of stepped in there. And here's the real thing, though. Any of these teams that have had injuries, the Nashvilles, the Detroits, those types, they're getting their goalies back. I mean, this is going to happen where Rinne's out 3 to 5 weeks. it's almost going to be like St. Louis again. Is Brodeur just going to hop from team to team to team, 2 or 3 teams this year and just kind of run out the string?
Hunter, a mercenary or something like that.
Really.
I think it would take an injury I think it would take an injury now at this point. I don't think he'd go into another situation where, oh, this is awkward, that kind of thing, where it did become awkward this week because I think the Blues have to do what's right for them and give themselves 2 goaltenders that they know can compete. But yeah, his numbers aren't good, and this is not a normal defense we're talking about that he was playing with. We're talking about the St. Louis Blues defense, which is one of the best units in the entire league.
Probably the best in the entire league.
Yeah, and if those are the numbers you're putting up with them, what are you going to do if you put when you go somewhere else? I mean, you
put him in Toronto, what would happen?
Yeah.
Put him in Colorado, what would happen?
It's sad to say because you see some athletes retire on top, but it's not always the case. And I think maybe if anyone who's a baseball fan following Jeter, who was pretty good in his last year, Mariano Rivera, who was great in his last year, for every athlete that gets that fairy tale ending, there's quite a few that really fall off, and unfortunately that's what we're seeing with Marty. And you know what? You can't blame him for wanting to play. It's what he's done his whole life. He loves the game. But as much as I could see, I do think he could catch on just because who knows who's going to get hurt. I think he could be called. But I think he was done even before the year started.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I kind of thought he would, he had the chance for that fairy tale ending. He got that last win in Jersey on the season finale last year. But he's going to be 43 in May, so it's just it's time.
Well, our friend Jeff O'Connor actually floated the idea around. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone had said it before that, but Jeff was the one who brought it up to me. Was the idea of the Devils signing Brodeur to a contract just to let him play the last game of the season this year? Devils are going nowhere.
If Corey Schneider's hurt too, I mean, he left Friday night's game with a reported upper body injury. So. Listen,
Is it a sneaky way for the Devils to tank by just letting Martin Brodeur be your goaltender?
It kind of is, but it also serves that kind of PR purpose because you know as well as I do that they're going to have trouble being relevant even in these last what is it 35 or 30 some odd games here. You give the fans one more chance to see him. And I could Lou's brought a bunch of guys back. I actually was thinking that this morning that Brodeur could be back in Jersey if that's a good. You'd always obviously stunt Keith Kincaid's growth even further, but
of course
that doesn't seem to bother anybody these days, stunting his growth. But no, I from a guy who's around from a storyline perspective, I would enjoy that. I don't think it's going to happen though.
No, if anything, he'd probably get one game at the end of the year or something, but I don't think he's going to come back and play multiple games for them.
Yeah.
Speaking of an even bigger mess, I know we touched on them a lot, the Minnesota Wild, so we'll do this one kind of quickly here because we've pretty much said everything we need to say minus the new stuff now. They had that schedule. We knew it was coming, Minnesota. We knew there was a chance that they could really be out of it by this point. After the 4 games they just played, and now they are. They looked every bit as bad as we expected. For a team that thought that they were going to be better than they were last year, they're at the bottom of the division, and Minnesota has a 5-alarm fire right now. I mean, they look like they're in trouble, Pat.
I think what's interesting about this is that Cliff Fletcher came out this week, the Minnesota Wild general manager, and he said that he was not going to fire Mike Yeo. Chuck Fletcher came out, the Minnesota Wild GM, said he's not going to fire Mike Yeo. And that was apparent according to, obviously, TSN's Bob McKenzie. So Bob that Chuck Fletcher is not firing Mike Yeo. He says, we're going to go get a goalie. We're going to go trade for Devin Dubnyk. And then they go to Buffalo and win 7-0. It's almost like the players were playing under the microscope of, we're getting our coach fired, so let's just play and do it until they get fired. They got run out of the building in Pittsburgh, and it was the goaltending again. But the funny thing about that to me is, like, Chuck Fletcher says, hey, we are absolutely not firing Mike Yeo. He's our guy. He's our coach. And then they say, oh, well, screw it then. We're going to play. And then they play, and they beat Buffalo 7-0. It's so bizarre to me, which it's kind of perfect for the Minnesota Wild this year. They're still only 7 out of a playoff spot. They have a game in hand on LA, but I don't disagree with you. It seems like Dubnyk's going to shore up the goaltending a little bit. I think it's kind of funny the way this year's playing out for the Wild. It's almost like the lost year for them. There's not much more I could say about it because we've been hammering the Wild pretty extensively. But maybe this is a turning point. I don't know. I don't think it is. But they went to Buffalo and they the doors off of the Sabres. So maybe there's something to that. I don't think I'll reiterate it. I don't think they're good enough to compete in the Western Conference. Though their schedule does kind of lighten up a little bit. They play Arizona Saturday night. They play Columbus Monday. And then they go to Detroit, which is a tough game. And then the All-Star break. So do I think that the Wild can get back in it a little bit here? Maybe. I mean, if Mike Yeo is their guy, they obviously give him an extension. But if Mike Yeo is their guy, I mean, for not doing the popular thing or not doing what would be conceived as the popular thing to do, and axing his coach, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, every time it seems like this is almost playing out like a soap opera, where all the layers and I just feel like at any moment we're going to see something come out about something with Yo or something about the players not feeling there's something. Just because, like, you look at where they were last year, where he got the extension, and now you look at that and you think of how does it get like that bad in a year where you go from kind of being the darlings and maybe making Chicago look back twice in that series to where they are now. I'm not really sure, but we've kind of we give Minnesota a tough time. And look, I love seeing them do well because I love the state, I love the city. I love Minneapolis, St. Paul, but to me,
we're recording this on Hockey Day in Minnesota too, so which says something about what the culture of hockey is up there.
Yes, I mean the fact that they even have a Hockey Day is great. But yeah, it's to me, and I also want them to get an outdoor game, and I feel like as long as they're not good, it's not going to happen, and it's a travesty. But enough on them. Let's do some hot or not, which I think it's interesting. When Pat, just to let all of you know, when Pat told me his hot team, I had to laugh a little bit because it was the team that he was so confident in that they were possibly even going to fall out of the playoffs, and now they're in first place in their division. They have guys scoring 4 goals in a game. It's the New York Islanders, Pat, and they look like they're every bit as hot as anyone else, and they're the savior of New York sports right now, if you want to throw, I guess, the Rangers in there too. But the Islanders, I think, have proved you wrong, which, hey, good for them, right?
Maybe I should just stick to my original opinion because the day they traded for Johnny Boychuk and Nick Leddy was the same day I got married. And I remember talking to one of my friends and telling him, the Islanders are going to be a playoff team based on those moves. And first off, everybody thought I was crazy because I was in the process of getting married, and I'm talking about the Islanders' playoff hopes. But I'm a believer in Yaroslav Halak. I have been for a long time, and everybody doubted me for saying, well, Halak and Leddy and Boychuk, this is a playoff team. And then I went against my own thing because they had struggled. And I'm going to argue that the turning point, if they hold on and win the Metro, and get the top seed, the turning point of their season came last Friday night in New Jersey because they were down 1-0 and 2-1, 2 1-goal deficits in New Jersey, having lost 3 games in a row to the lowly Devils, and they came from behind. They got a power play, scored a late power play goal, forced overtime and won the game, and haven't looked back. They are every bit as good as any other team in the Eastern Conference, in the Metropolitan Division, in perhaps the entire league. Because you mentioned Kyle Okposo, and he was fantastic. I mean, and you look at what they've done. They've gone toe-to-toe with perhaps their 2 biggest rivals in the Rangers and Pittsburgh, and they outscored them 9-3. They scored 4 third-period goals Friday night in a 6-3 win over the Penguins. And, you mentioned Okposo's huge night. Josh Bailey had 3 assists. That fourth line ran play at the Garden on, I believe it was Tuesday night, in the 3-0 win over. I mean, the Islanders dominated that game at the Garden. And Halak made, I mean, basically from the start of the second period on, where the Rangers hit 3 posts in the first period. And then the Islanders just went on to dominate. And they ran possession, they controlled play, and they looked like a completely different team. So they've won 4 straight as of this recording, and they're leading the entire Eastern Conference right now. If the playoffs started today, the first round playoff series would be them and the Bruins, which has the Bruins as the 8th seed. Which, I mean, it might be a tough matchup for them, but I like the Islanders right now, and there's not much not to like. I think they're a deep team, and this all comes with some of their players injured. I mean, they have Mikhail Grabovski's hurt, Lubomir Vrasovsky's hurt. I might have just butchered his name. It's Lubomir Visnovsky. He's hurt.
Yes.
But they're a deep team, and they're a 4-line team. They can get contributions, goal contributions. Like I said, that fourth line, Matt Martin, Casey Cizikas, and Cal Clutterbuck, they dominated at the Garden, and then their top line dominated the Penguins, and they're good against adversity too. I mean, I saw a stat last night where the Islanders are something like now 13-4 when the opposition scores first. So, and they turned around a 2-0 lead from the Penguins, and like I said, and then it was 3-2. It was 2-0 Penguins, and then it went 2-2, and then it went 3-2 on a goal by Crosby, and then they scored 4 straight. Obviously, an empty netter in there too, but 4 straight goals against the Penguins. Obviously in their barn, but I don't know. Maybe my problem with the Islanders is that they get higher for those games, the Rangers and the Penguins, than they do for anybody else. Because if you watch them closely, they play very well against those two teams. And part of me still thinks the Rangers are more talented, and the Penguins are probably more skilled. But that the compete level for the Islanders is so high in those divisional games against the Penguins and Rangers. And if they play those games at the Coliseum, it's even bigger. So
Absolutely.
The first game.
You saw that with them 2 years ago when they clinched a playoff spot, and they kind of fell off that. Where that is an interesting point that you bring up. That they seem to kind of have these ebbs and flows. They can really bring their game up, and then they can kind of fall off a little bit. And you wonder if that's the case, if they're actually going to be able to hold on to the division lead. Look, are they going to go out there and lose a couple games to the bottom feeders because they don't have the same kind of intensity?
They certainly could, but what's interesting to me is if you look at what they do. I mean, 2 of the goals they gave up Friday night to Pittsburgh were power play goals, one by Crosby and one by David Perron. So stay out of the box. They're solid 5-on-5. Their fourth line can score goals at this point, and they're basically they can score goals 1 through 4. They have arguably the best center, well, probably the second best center in the division, and a great top line. I mean, everything runs through Tavares, and the guy's great. So I'm back on the Islander bandwagon. I hope my seat was reserved because I hopped off there for a little while. But as far as the hot teams are concerned, Dave, you have a pretty solid one too.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Nashville Predators. I know everyone's going to think, whoa, they just lost their goalie. All right, first off, they were hot as can be before he went down. They're 8-0-2. I actually have to look past there to see what they've been, but they have been. They just keep finding ways to get it done, and you think they hit that lull about a month ago, where all of a sudden, or even maybe more than that now, where Chicago caught up to them, and it was like, oh, here we go, here comes Chicago. They're going to just run away with it, and now Nashville's 6 points ahead in the Central. And it kind of just happened where Chicago kind of give them, which interesting that I'm talking Chicago, you'll find out why. it almost feels like they just kind of righted the ship at the right time and kind of hit their lull. I mean, hey, they could hit another one now without Pekka Rinne, who is
Hmm.
probably going to be gone for about 5 weeks, which isn't easy. That's quite a few games, and certainly without him, they're not nearly as good a team. As Pekka Rinne is showing again this year that he's an elite level goaltender. But I like this team. I mean, look, Philip Forsberg continues to do what he does. Colin Wilson is a guy who has 30 points already,
Hmm.
and he's looked really good. He's plus 22. He's two behind Philip Forsberg. They're getting good. We always talk about center play. They're getting good. They're getting very good center play right now. And defensively, I still think Roman Josi is one of the most underrated players in the
Hmm.
entire league, just because he's sandwiched in between a young phenom and a veteran who might be the overall best defenseman in the entire league.
Hmm.
But overall, I really have to say that this team, I thought they could be good this year. But when you watch them and they dominate play against good teams and they find ways to win against some teams, even when they're not at their best, I don't know if I'd exactly be scared of them in the playoffs because I just don't know if they can keep it up. But Peter Laviolette does it every time. The first year
Hmm.
that he's with the team, they do great things. Everywhere he's gone, he's had major success in his first year coaching, and that trend could happen. I do. I think Nashville could really figure it out. Yeah, they're only looking at it now, and they had a crazy 7-6 game that we talked about with
Yeah.
the Kings.
LA.
Yeah, and then since then, their only one was a shootout loss to Anaheim. All right, fine. They beat Dallas in OT. They beat Minnesota, which I guess, being what we just talked about, isn't that hard anymore. But they bombed Vancouver 5-1, and then they won a 4-3 game against the Capitals, who have been very hot too. That's a big one. They have some good games coming up, though. The next two are Red Wings Canadiens, so we can see what they do against some of the better teams in the East. And they got the Blues coming up before the end of the month, which is another good one. And in their schedule, they do have some tough games. They have the Western the West Coast road trip coming up still, sandwiched in with yeah, wow, yeah, they've got the
Every night.
they go. Hmm?
So that's playing the Western Conference schedule, isn't it? Just playing possible games every night.
Yeah, that's the thing, is it's really not easy, and you want it's a good point actually, where you wonder if someone from the middle of the pack is going to be able to just kind of chip away. Is Chicago still going to be in this? But switching gears now from my hot team to my cold team, I'll wrap it around here. Chicago Blackhawks. They seemed like they were headed in the right direction. I thought they were going to run away with division. I don't know how you felt about that, Pat, but
Hmm.
I thought they were on their way to just surpassing Nashville, and there's no way Nashville could, or even St. Louis could compete with them. They're tied with St. Louis in points right now with 58, and again, I think with them it's a little bit of the ebbs and flows kind of thing where they made their run, got in position. Now they're going to relax for a little bit, with the All-Star break coming up, and I'm sure they'll turn it on again. But the thing is, I think this division is too talented for them to do that. Look, they maybe they kind of took their foot off the gas for a little bit, and now they're looking at the taillights of the Nashville Predators. So, for me, Chicago. I think a few weeks ago when we first started doing this, I picked them as my cold team because they were, and all of a sudden they got hot again. So maybe I have lit the ignition in Chicago, perhaps.
To be fair, too, I mean, you look at how many games that team has played over the past 5 years, 5 seasons. It's hard to get when you're just kind of coast to that playoff spot. It's kind of hard to get up for some of those games. We'll get to talk about LA. So we'll get to them in a minute. But they're 5-5 in their last 10. The goals against is still really good. They're still second best in the NHL in goals against. They still dominate possession play. They're fourth in the league fourth in the league in Fenwick, I believe. Yeah, fourth in the league in Corsi for percentage, and fourth in the league in Fenwick for percentage. So the possession is there. They run into hot goalies too, is the big thing. They ran into Hutchinson on Friday night, and they have a tendency to have goalies for whatever reason steal games in Chicago. People rise
People get
to
up
that
to play them,
level.
don't they?
Yeah,
People get up to
no
play
doubt.
the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, they're defending. I mean, they're a perennial Western Conference finalist. They're arguably the best team in the NHL. I think the Blackhawks, they'll be there in the end. And like you said, I think it's time. It's a cold time of the year in Chicago, so it's hard to get going a little bit. Maybe it's hard when you're playing these games and you're pretty sure of a playoff spot. What's weird to me is they're only 2 up on the wild card, which is a little alarming.
Well,
So,
that's the kind of the point I was trying to make, though, is that I don't think they can sit back right now. Not to mention, you don't want to play St. Louis.
no.
I know they beat them last year and that kind of thing, but I don't know if I'd want to have to deal with that series. I would do everything possible to get that 1 seed and not play
Sure.
St. Louis because sure, you could beat them, but that's a good team. And to me, I don't know if they can afford to have these little gaps in their play because who knows? They could end up. I mean, not to say I don't think they're going to be a wild card team, but they're precariously close to being so right now.
Mm-hmm. The other thing about that is that they're not getting much of a break. I mean, you look at the All-Star breaks coming up, but half their team is going to the All-Star game.
Yeah.
So,
that's another thing.
Yeah, so my cold team was the team who beat the Blackhawks in the playoffs last year, the Los Angeles Kings, and let's be fair here. This is always the LA Kings' time to be cold. I mean, it's almost like they don't turn it on until their coach's job is in jeopardy. And Daryl Sutter is not going to get fired this year for sure. But last year, remember, there was some talk about his shtick running thin, and I watched them. I mean, they've lost 3 games in regulation in their last 10. But if you want to get real here, they've lost 7 of 10 games here. And that's not. I mean, that sounds like the LA Kings in January to me. I mean, I watched them just get their doors blown off by the Devils earlier in the week, and it's a little alarming because the goaltending to me is what's alarming, is because Jonathan Quick has not been really good at all. And if you watched, I mean, Martin Jones got back-to-back starts. He got Toronto and he got the Devils back-to-back. And you mentioned the 7-6 loss to Nashville. I mean, they blew a 2-0 lead to the Rangers January 8th it was. But the results are a little alarming, and it seems like the goaltending play. I mean, Jones shut out the Leafs Monday, and then he got the start against Jersey, got pulled, and then Quick gave up 2 goals on 7 shots in the second period, and then Jones came back in the game. So it's a little the statistics for Quick right now are really just not good. And maybe it's a situation where they get a little stale. I mean, Quick's save percentage is .912. It's not bad. It's not great. His goals against are .249. Jones's numbers aren't better, but it seems like Daryl Sutter is trying to do some stuff to inspire his team a little bit here. But again, this is a team that's so accustomed to making the playoffs and playing playoff games that may get a little stale here for them. But it can't. You said that the Blackhawks can't afford to get stale. The Kings definitely can't afford to get stale. They're 1 up on the Flames for the last playoff spot. So they kind of need to kick it into gear here a little bit.
Yeah, I think as much as we give stock to these teams because they always make it or they're always capable of making that run, I think when you make those kind of statements, we forget about the fact that the other teams have a say in that too. And I know, actually, I'll get to that game in a second with Calgary and LA, but to me, the Kings are, hate to say it, skating on thin ice right now. Yeah, I know. I don't know if they can just turn it on necessarily. It might be too late, or they might fall off. Look,
I think the other thing too is they just lost Tanner Pearson and both Tanner Pearson and Tyler Toffoli. So some of their younger, energy players aren't going to be around. I mean, they
were carrying this team earlier in the year.
Yeah, that 70s line I mean, they're still driving possession. So they're still third in the league in Corsi 4. Or, I'm sorry, third in the league in Fenwick 4. Third in the league first in the league in Corsi 4. So they're getting a lot of shots blocked. But Pearson and Toffoli, the injuries are bad too. So I mean, one of the it's a situation where uh, Pearson's going to miss 3 months. He broke his leg, and Toffoli has mono apparently. I mean, good for Tyler Toffoli. He's a young kid, catching mono like the rest of us did when we were younger. But Pearson's injury is serious. So this is a broken leg. He's going to miss months, 3 months of which basically would put him in position to return for the playoffs. I mean, assuming that again the Kings get there. I think that, like I said, this is the time of the year in which the Kings always kind of slide and tail off, and they always kind of find a way. They're going to need some of their younger blood. I mean, guys like Jordan Nolan maybe to kind of push them a little bit, because who knows with Slava Voinov either, because he's not played at all with the domestic violence thing hanging over his head. It seems like this is a year going south fast for the Kings. But Daryl Sutter is still a great coach, and that's what great coaches do, right? They get their guys to play.
Yeah, I would think it'd be foolish to count them out, but I think it'd also be foolish just to expect them to make it this year, because every year is different, every team is different, and we shall see. So, Pat, I know we're going to do something a little bit different right now, an idea that we had come up with here. So let's give it a crack.
Let's give it a crack. In fact, we're going to fill in the blank. We are going to trade off sentences, or I guess we're both going to fill in the blank. So let's start. We already talked about the Islanders. We mentioned the Penguins. We mentioned the Rangers, and obviously the Lightning and Canadiens. So fill in the blank, Dave. The blank are the Eastern Conference's best team.
I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning. The more I watch of them, I think they're rounding into form. I think the younger guys are really starting to even gel further. They have one of the best players in the league. They got decent goaltending. I think Tampa Bay, who I actually thought was going to struggle a little bit this year with maybe some sophomore slumps and that kind of thing, I think Tampa Bay is the best team in the Eastern Conference right now.
I'm going to say, and I know they didn't prove it last night, the Pittsburgh Penguins still, because, listen, Marc-Andre Fleury looked like playoff Marc-Andre Fleury Friday night. But look at the talent they still have on the team. I mean, this team can kind of score at will. Crosby scored a couple goals Friday night. They obviously lost Ole Mata for the rest of the season. As you know, Sean Gentili told us that was coming, and sure enough, it did. But they still have Patrick Hornqvist on IR. Blake Como still on IR. If you look at just the names and the skill level of these guys in their top 9. You got Kunitz, Crosby, Perron, Malkin, Bennett, Nick Spalling's a nice player. Brandon Sutter is your third-line center. Steve Downey, when he's not cross-checking guys in the head, it has some skill. And their defense is still better than most everybody else. Again, it's all up to Fleury, but I still say the Pittsburgh Penguins.
All right. So the next one we have is blank is the most undeserving All-Star.
I'm going to say Patrick Elias. Patrick Elias. And he even, mostly because I trust his judgment, because he said he's the most undeserving All-Star. They obviously reinstated the year, or the thing that every team must be represented this year. Elias has 6 goals. He has 20 points. He's minus 15. Which minus 15 is, I believe, is worst on the Devils. There aren't a lot of great. I went through the rosters yesterday, and there aren't a lot of bad All-Star picks. But I think Elias is the worst. What about you, Dave?
For me, it's funny. I was actually going to say Elias.
You can agree.
I'm trying to think here. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with Brent Burns, only because he's been really bad defensively this year, and that bothers me. I love Brent Burns, one of my favorite players in the entire league, the caveman beard, big fan, but he's been very rough around the edges defensively. And sure, that's great. His offensive numbers are very good. I mean, he's got 35 points already, and that's fantastic. But to me, I want to see guys who are a little bit more defensemen, at least. I want to see guys that can play two-way hockey. And for me, Burns, his offensive numbers kind of overshadow the fact that he's been very lost at times defensively, which makes sense because they've moved him forward, they moved him back. So for me, I'm going to
Come
go with
on,
Princeton.
Dave. Nobody plays defense in the All-Star game. You know
I
that.
know, but I'm an old school kind of guy. I like seeing defense. That's why I
Yeah,
don't
but an
watch the.
old school kind of All-Star game is 14-11.
Well, I'm talking more about like the idea of old school hockey being played
Yeah,
in the All-Star game.
yeah,
I'll take a
no.
2-1 game.
Yeah, right. You would be the only one that would take the 2-1 game. The goalie would be the goaltender would be the MVP there. Although that's happened before too. All right, we'll move on to the next one. We obviously made reference to some of the old guard making the playoffs, so let's touch this one. The Boston Bruins will finish blank, inside or outside the playoffs.
I'm going inside. I think it's a no-brainer. I know you're big on the Panthers, but to me, there's no team that's even remotely close. Is Boston a threat? I'm not really sure, but I absolutely think that they are a playoff team.
I'm gonna say inside too, though I'm not as confident about it as you are. Florida still is 5 points is a lot to be out of the playoff spot, but Florida has 3 games in hand still. So if you consider that fact, they're actually on pace for more points. Boston obviously with the row lead right now. Dave Lozo said it last week on our show, and I'm agreeing with him. The Eastern Conference is pretty set. Florida might be the only team that can catch anybody in the East, but I'm going to say inside. Though they did just lose Brad Marchand on that dangerous slew foot. I think they're kind of finding it here a little bit. The goaltending is still good. They're starting to get some contributions from some guys that they expected from. Lucic has basically transformed his game lately. Bergeron looked like an all-star, a superstar. This David Pastrnak kid who has been playing with Marchand and Bergeron looks like a superstar.
He looks
in the
great.
making, a top-line player for sure. If you had asked me maybe 5 days ago, I might have said no outside, but I think the Bruins are going to get in. I think this is like a Detroit last year situation where the Bruins are kind of in transition mode, and if they somehow find a way in, they'll be a little dangerous. But I think the Bruins are going to make it.
I do too. All right, so let's go with the same question, but Los Angeles Kings. I know we touched on that before, but as of right now, Pat, if you had to just real quick here, Kings, in or out?
I'd say in, only because, the only team that could. We mentioned a bunch of teams that we thought could catch them last week, but a lot of them tapered off. Dallas has kind of tapered off a little bit of late. We mentioned Minnesota earlier. Colorado actually making a hard charge here a little bit. Colorado's only 3 points out of LA, but I think the only team realistically that could catch the Kings are the Flames, and the Flames are still having that possession thing. Their third worst Corsi for percentage. The Fenwick numbers are not good either. They're kind of getting carried by the goaltending has been pretty solid. 115 goals against is actually second best in the Pacific Division, behind only Vancouver. They've allowed fewer goals than the Kings and Ducks, the Flames. But still, the Kings are going to get it here, I think. Not having Toffoli and Pearson's going to hurt them, but Daryl Sutter coaches his team up. It's still, they have the heart of a champion. They're the defending champs. I think they're going to get in. What do you think?
I do. I have to say yes. I think there's no way. Could it happen? We were talking about it before, maybe, but I can't make that kind of statement and put them out of it right now.
Yeah.
As of it said, look, the injuries could be a big part of it, but we'll see.
Last question for you, Dave. This has been obviously the topic of conversation on the radio, on Twitter, everywhere. Constant talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs makes you blank.
Makes me wish that other teams that actually play good hockey and have talent around this league were talked about on talk radio and TV nearly as much as Toronto. Basically saying, look, this is a team that everyone, that they're valued the highest. They're so crazy up there. I just wish the rest of the league got the kind of attention that the Toronto Maple Leafs get, because they can be a meddling team that's not going to make the playoffs, and they'll still get a hell of a lot more attention than some teams around the league.
It's disappointing to see that. I would say it makes me want to pull my hair out, because every day you hear more and more about Should Phil Kessel get traded? Should he not get traded? Should Dion Phaneuf wear the C or should he not wear the C? Is he a captain? Is he do other teams respect him? Is Peter Horachek's future in doubt? I mean, so many things that are just to fill airwaves. And we're talking about it now, too, again. You mentioned last week, and I agree with you, that the top line really isn't Tyler Bozak's not a great top line center, but there are a lot of things that are wrong with the Leafs, a lot more than their top line. They actually broke up that top line this week. They moved Daniel Winnick up there to the top line left wing, and then they finally moved Van Riemsdyk back up there. I don't know why Nazem Kadri can't get a spot or can't get a shot on the Leafs top line, but I'm with you. I think the Leafs are basically the Knicks of the NHL at this point, or the Knicks or the Lakers if you combine those two. Just completely not there on their skill level, but for whatever reason, just constantly all over the airwaves, and it drives me crazy. I don't like it either. So that's what we'll do with that. With the fill in the blank. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Dave, let's wrap this up. What are you looking forward to most in the next week on the NHL schedule?
Next week, Calgary and Los Angeles square off. If it's going to happen, that's a 4-point game. I've enjoyed the Flames all year. I've actually watched a lot of them because they're just entertaining, and I love the fact that the fans are getting back into it. If there's going to be a chance that they can do it, this game will certainly help. Hey, why not? Go Flames.
I am going to look at or keep my eyes squarely on, just like the rest of the country is, right, on the Rangers and the Penguins on Sunday. You mentioned how the Penguins, or I mentioned how the Penguins are still the best team in the East, but the Rangers are only 4 out with a game in hand, and the Rangers are charging hard. I know Marc-Andre Fleury looked bad Friday night. I'm intrigued to see whether or not the Rangers can get in his head a little bit. The game's in Pittsburgh. Plus, that could also be a first-round playoff preview in the Metropolitan Division. There are some terrific games out west. Anaheim and LA play. You mentioned Calgary and LA. Calgary and Anaheim. The last game on the ledger before the All-Star break also is Wednesday. It'll be the Kings at the Sharks. Always fun when those two square off. I'll be looking at that one too, but my eyes will be mostly focused on Rangers Penguins Sunday afternoon.
I think it should have been the Chicago Blackhawks versus Zemgus Girgensons. That should have been the last game.
and the low. That's basically the All-Star game, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, why not test them out or something like that? All right. Yeah. So for Pat Pickens, I'm Dave Turner. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week. Have a good one.
See ya.
Cool.
All right. Not our best.